Be sure you are mature enough to witness the shocking details of this video. Welcome to the Haunted Mansion. Feel right at home. I am the Phantom of the Gardens, and now I will tell you a scary fact. My friends didn't reply. Zach simply kept his flashlight pointed beneath the outhouse and Kevin sighed in annoyance, tapping his foot impatiently. But now we could all see it. The hole. The white tube in the ground that brought the golf balls back into the little hut at the entrance that once contained all of the golf balls and clubs. It was barely visible over the mound created by the fake turf, but it was still there and I had a clear shot. I placed the ball on the ground and, aiming carefully, rolled it towards the hole. We could hear the ball enter the pipe, the sound of it swirling down into the ground echoing in the silent park. Zach and I stepped back beside Kevin, the light now shining on the outhouse itself. I clenched my fist in anticipation, wishing with all my heart that it would somehow still work, that the door would open and the dog would still be there. It was a stupid wish. We all jumped at the sudden sound of the once familiar flushing noise, now slightly distorted. Then the doors began to open and the loud hiss of the hydraulics resonated through the night. We stood there breathless and silent. It worked. We actually made it work. After all these years, I'd finally get to see him again. I was so happy that I could feel the sides of my mouth curl up into a magnificent smile, as if I were a child opening a present. But the present wasn't what I had been expecting at all. There he stood, my once familiar friend, my reward for getting my hole in one dot, but I could hardly recognize him. The fur that covered his metal frame was matted and wet, and his overalls hung loose around him, like it would if someone had lost a great deal of weight. My breath caught in my throat, which was now suddenly dry. I swallowed softly, eyes widening as they traveled up to the dog's face. It was a horrible, hideous sight. The fake fur on half of his head had torn away, exposing the wires and joint mechanism in his mechanical jaw. I never remembered him having teeth. On the same side, his plastic eye had sprung from its socket and now remained dangling by his torn cheek. Then he blinked, the mechanism on the broken eye shuddering around the exposed wire, releasing small sparks. More sparks flew as his arm shot up with a clang and the hinge of his jaw creaked as his mouth flopped open. He spoke. "What do you think you're doing?" The funny southern drawl of his voice was completely gone, replaced by something raspy and angry. And although I could hear the chilling distortion in his voice box, he sounded more human than I ever remembered. Kevin ran. He didn't even look back. Zach dropped his phone and slowly backed away, screaming as he stared into the dog's one good eye, which seemed to turn on him at the disturbance. Then somehow the dog moved forward. He wasn't programmed to walk. As far as I knew, the hydraulics attached to his back only sat him up. He wasn't supposed to walk, but by God, I saw that once funny animatronic dog from my childhood step out of that old, withered outhouse towards us. I stood there, frozen in fear, staring at it. Fuck this. I heard Zach utter before her two left me. Now I was alone with him. I had spent so many years thinking about this very moment. I spent countless hours thinking about this dog and wanting to see him one last time. But I knew then I should never have stepped foot into that old park. My childhood was dead, as broken as the wires and metal rods that barely held the dog together. He seemed to watch Zach go, his good eye turning with a cracking sound as he watched him disappear into the darkness. Then it turned on me. "Get out," he commanded, his arm still pointing, now in the direction of the parking lot, where the headlights of Zach's car had just turned on. I didn't move. I could only stare. Was this some sick nightmare? Some bizarre fantasy my brain thought up to get my mind off a time I could no longer return to? The thing stepped closer, its disfigured face near inches from my own. The smell of wet dog seemed to invade my nostrils. "Get out of here," it boomed, the voice box short-circuiting as if it had exploded before slowly fading out. It sounded like multiple voices had spoken, all deep and aggressive, almost demonic. This time, I listened and ran as fast as I could through the park, which was dimly lit by the headlights of the car. My eyes darted around. The once familiar area now seemed foreign and strange. I couldn't tell where I was going. I heard the sound of children laughing, the trumpeting call of an elephant, and the clanging and grinding of metal gears. When I finally reached the fence, I tried sliding through the hole we came through, but I got stuck on something. I looked down to see if my jacket was caught, but it wasn't. Then I looked back. Staring right into my eyes was one white plastic eyeball with a painted-on black pupil. My eyes widened, staring back into the black spot as if it were a hole, ready to swallow me alive. Then I discovered the reason I was stuck. The hand of the animatronic dog was gripping the back of my shirt. I know that hand was supposed to be stuck in a pointing position. It didn't have any mechanical function to actually open and close. But then again, the dog wasn't supposed to be walking anyway. "You shouldn't have come back," I heard it whisper, sending a chill up my spine. Then it released me with a shove and I fell through the opening in the fence. Scrambling to my feet, I ran to Zach's car, not once looking back as he sped off down Main Street. It's been 5 years since that night. I don't talk to Kevin and Zach much anymore, and we have never once spoken of the incident, not even on the car ride home. I never drove down that stretch of Main Street, either. Until today. It was late and the road I usually take had a detour which led me right to it. What harm would driving by do? I should have known better. I tried not to look. I really did. But I just couldn't help sneaking a peek. I couldn't see much through all the rain, but I noticed the large for-leaf sign that now hung on the fence. The giraffe was gone, or perhaps it had fallen over and was hidden under the thick brush. With a sigh, I continued on, trying to push the memories of that night out of my mind. My windshield began to fog up from the indecisive New England weather, so I put my defroster on. Then I noticed something. Instead of clearing from the bottom up like it normally would, my windshield began to clear in patterns. It had formed words. I stared at them, hoping with all hope that it was just a fluke or a fragment of my imagination. But the message was clear. Don't come back. When the police asked what caused me to crash into the pole just outside the abandoned park, all I could do was wrap the blanket they gave me tightly around myself as I stared back towards the bushes and trees that concealed the location of the 18th hole. Dog was all I could tell them. It was the dog. Join us. Subscribe.